Yes.
This is 45 monkeys jumping in the classroom, which is terrible.
Yes, we in California had a 20-to-1 ratio from K to 3 for like 5 years, and then the budget crisis, and now our elementary schools are probably at about 30, 35 maybe, again, depending on where you are. And again, resources are very tight, and sometimes schools are overcrowded, and so in certain neighborhoods, rooms that used to be offices, and I've even heard of rooms that used to be restrooms, now are classrooms. So just depending on where you are, that could be part of the reality of schooling. And you know, obviously, if you are having class in what used to be a restroom, your quality of learning is very different than someone who's in a very nice classroom that has windows and doors. And
I have a question
yes.
about involving families,
yes.
parents,
yes.
in transforming all this community. So we have the same problem here because we have this small high school, like we call American Academy in Tennessee.
Yes, I visited.
I'm teaching the Georgian.
Oh, okay.
We have a hard time with this problem, like involving families
yes.
in the education of their
yes.
children. So we invite them into school, we ask them to do some work, but you know, they are lazy, they just don't want to be involved. Do you have some kind of strategies? How can we improve on this?
Well, I'll start with the assumption that one, they don't want to be there, and two, that they're lazy. Because we make similar assumptions about the parents in our urban schools. And that's simply not so. At least in an American context, we find that in an urban context, many of our parents have 2 or 3 jobs. So their time precludes them from being able to participate in the ways in which the school deems it appropriate. For example, my daughter goes to a school and they have meetings for parents at 8:15 in the morning. Well, I work. I can't be at the meeting at 8:15, so I'm excluded from all of those meetings. It's not that I'm not interested, it's not that I'm lazy, but it's that the school has created structures and barriers where parents can't participate. So one of the things you have to do is begin to challenge the assumptions about the ways in which you want parents to be involved. What do you want parents to do? Well, we say we want parent involvement, but really we just want them to show up at a meeting, right? So really saying, what is it we want parents to do? How could they be most helpful? And then structure it within the school context so they can participate in that way.
Wow.
Yes. Any other questions you might?
Usually what we have parent night at 8 p.m.
so that they can come.
They can come, yeah. But on the other hand, every parent council meeting ends up with dinner in the restaurant. That's it.
Well, the other thing is that parents, we have to change, we have to educate families that we want them in schools. In the American context, in the elementary school, we tend to have a lot of parent involvement because we have created a culture that says we want parents at the elementary school. But by middle school or secondary school, high school, the word is we don't want parents on the campus, very clearly. You know, I try to volunteer at my daughter's school very clearly, don't come. We don't want you. So it's not a welcoming place. So we have to make schools a welcoming place for families and give them meaningful opportunities to participate, right? I mean, I'm a professor. There's lots of things I could do at the school to be helpful. Talk about college, to, you know, even tutor. But the culture is, don't come on the campus, right? So there are resources in the community that we don't leverage. So if we think about families as resources, how do we tap into them as a resource to bring to the community, to the school?
On the other hand, if we invite parents in the school, for example,
yes.
we have, coin has always 2 sides, right?
Yes.
We have disaster because I remember one parent standing next to the classroom door and like making like this to the teacher that I like your class and good job. That's ridiculous. So coin always has 2 sides. So maybe inviting them too much into school is not a good idea.
Well, see, there you go. So inviting them too much is not a good idea. See, but when is it appropriate? What's the balance? Yeah. And when they come, what do they do? You know, the other thing you might want to think about is how often do we take the school to the community? You know, maybe we could have meetings places other than the school. Perhaps we could even have teachers visit homes, right? So we have to think differently about parental involvement. You know, if you come to my home and we have a good conversation, if you ask me to do something in my daughter's school, oh, by all means, I'm ready to come, right? Because now we have a relationship. Yes.
Robert, I was just wondering in this context if I feel like a lot of times in the States, we always look at what we're doing wrong.
Yes.
With minority students specifically.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, and maybe you didn't do it in this specific study, but if you have experience in looking at, you were saying that there are more whites and Asians in the advanced placement classes.
Yes.
And has anyone looked at what are we doing right with those students and why are those students getting in, and then figuring out maybe how do we not do that for you? You see the difference though?
Yes.
Instead of saying what are we doing wrong there, say what are we doing right, and figuring out how to apply it. Is that?
Yes. Well, you know, one of the things that I think that we are attempting to do right, but is met with a lot of resistance, is like an all-male academy or a black male academy. And you said, well, why might that be right? Because those settings allow us to understand what it is that makes kids successful, right? But those kinds of strategies are met with a lot of resistance for a lot of reasons, right? So if you try to isolate the minority students to understand what the difficulties are, it may mean adding resources, and it becomes a resource allocation issue. But I do think that we have done some work, again, looking at strategies that might be most helpful in terms of curriculum. You know, again, we go back to this idea of multicultural education, including more lived experiences in the curriculum that connects with kids, right? We have a number of scholars on our campus who are looking at issues of literacy, particularly like hip hop, and to the degree to which that connects kids and aligns with where they are. But I think one of the most important things in terms of doing what are we doing for kids is empowering them. How do we empower them to be critical, one, of the system, and not to fall prey to this defeatist ideology that they don't belong to go to college, or they don't belong in these advanced placement classes. One of the schools in our study actually created an all-male academy. And there was a lot of resistance. But what that experience showed was that those young men had an opportunity to be empowered because they felt all of a sudden that they mattered. And just the feeling of mattering to the institution increased their academic achievement. Not all of them, but the majority of them, we saw some academic growth, right? And I think it was the ways in which we connect kids to the institution.
Just as a follow-up, sort of similarly, and this is a personal interest of mine, the idea of codes of power and looking at access, because we always talk about access to AP classes or something, and have you guys looked at all at access to codes of power, knowledge of power, whatever you want to call it,
right?
And how maybe certain groups have more access to that versus others. You can say no. It's just very specific.
Well, no, but but again, if we go back to looking at equity issues being an issue of access, and the question is access to what? Right? And oftentimes that access to what is those things in the schooling environment that represent power. So it's the power of knowledge, it's the power of participation, it's the power of choice. And oftentimes we find that within a school context, certain kids have access to that power naturally, and other kids have to fight to get that power. Yeah.